Decades ago, suddenly I, Maria, became a single mom, juggling my eldest daughter May, who was in her terrible twos, and my younger daughter Kelly, who was throwing toddler tantrums. My days were filled with work and childcare. I was so busy that I hardly remembered those times. Well, those days were as turbulent as raging waves. The reason I became a single mother? I was told that my ex-husband David had passed away. You're probably thinking, told he died? What do you mean? Because even though I believed he was gone, one day, out of the blue, David appeared right before my eyes, alive and well. I had long believed he was no longer in this world, so when he suddenly showed up, I was so shocked that I thought my heart would stop. Back then, our family lived in a guest house on David's parents' property. But the in-laws rarely interfered with us, and if anything, they were rather cold. That said, there was no malice or bullying, so I simply thought it was an easy relationship and didn't mind it. David, despite his busy work, was quite supportive when it came to parenting. He wasn't great at housework, but we managed to divide tasks between us. Even before we got married, we always talked about wanting at least 2 kids. Ideally, we wanted to conceive our second child when May was around 2 or 3 years old. However, when May was just 1, I was in a traffic accident, sustaining injuries that took 4 months to heal. On top of that, David faced severe harassment from his boss, which took a toll on his mental health, leading him to quit his job. Given all this, it wasn't exactly a time we could think of having another baby. In the end, Kelly was born when May was 5. Personally, I felt that as long as our children were born healthy, the age gap didn't matter. But as they grew, May became very assertive. I naturally spent a lot of time with young Kelly, which led to May feeling left out and starting to regress, acting babyish again. Of course, I tried to indulge her, holding her and giving in to her wants, but there were times when things didn't go smoothly. Then she'd throw those massive toddler tantrums, screaming and crying. To make things harder, while May didn't cry much at night, Kelly was the opposite. She'd frequently wake up crying. David and I, utterly exhausted, tried our best to soothe her, often running on little sleep. In such a state, every cry felt like a drill to the head, and it was tough. Gradually, we lost our patience. There were moments when I'd speak harshly to May, seeing her face streaked with tears as she slept. Guilt would wash over me, and I'd cry too. Once May started elementary school, her regression settled down a bit. However, just as that was happening, Kelly's toddler tantrums kicked off, so there was never really a calm moment. Day in and day out, I was swamped with childcare and housework. I was so focused on the kids that I didn't notice the changes in David. Around that time, David's career hit its peak, and he became very busy. He'd come home around 10 or 11 p.m. and sometimes even past midnight. Of course, taking care of the kids alone during that time was incredibly challenging. So I asked my mother-in-law, Lily, "I'm sorry to ask, but can you help me out when David gets home late?" To my surprise, she happily agreed, helping with meal preparations and other tasks. Lily was a great cook. She'd prepare various dishes, including make-ahead side dishes. She always made sure the flavors were mild, making it easier for the kids to eat, which was a huge help. But deep down, I really wanted David to be there with me, raising our kids. Once I asked him, "Can't you come home a little earlier sometimes?" "I'd love to, but it's just really tough right now." I understood. David had recently changed jobs and was still learning the ropes. It was natural for him to be busy adjusting to the new role, so I couldn't press him further. However, our life took a sudden turn because of a text I received from David. That evening, I got a message from David that read, "There's been a major issue at work and all the staff have to deal with it. I might have to stay at the office overnight. So please, take care of the kids." But when 8 a.m., then 9 a.m. came and went the next day with no sign of David and no communication, I grew more concerned. Texts went unanswered and calls went straight to voicemail. Feeling something was off, I called his office, only to be told the most unbelievable news. "Your husband resigned last week." Turns out David had submitted his resignation a month prior. Completely lost, I immediately hung up and went to the in-laws' house. I told them David had quit his job without telling me, hadn't come home since yesterday, and might have been involved in an accident or incident. I said I was considering consulting the police. For some reason they responded, "Going to the police just because he hasn't come home for one day is an overreaction. He'll probably show up soon. Just wait and see." I retorted, "He secretly quit his job without telling his wife, and now he's missing. How is that an overreaction?" They stubbornly replied, "Just wait. Do not contact the police." Finally, John, my father-in-law, snapped at me, "We'll contact him and let you know. Just wait." Reluctantly, I agreed, even though I was being overruled. In all honesty, I should have ignored the in-laws and consulted the police. But since we'd received help in various ways within our condo community, I couldn't be too confrontational. The next day, I was summoned by the in-laws who told me, "We've gotten in touch with David. He's alive and well." Relieved, I asked, "Then where is David?" "We can't tell you that. Just know he is safe. He won't be coming home for a while, so use this money for living expenses." John then placed an envelope filled with money in front of me. Being handed money for living expenses without any explanation? It wasn't like I'd just say, "Thanks," and understood. I repeatedly asked about David's whereabouts, but they wouldn't tell me. In the end, they yelled, "Stop pestering us, just leave," and practically shoved the envelope at me before showing me the door. So began a bizarre life without David, full of unanswered questions. From that day on, I had many sleepless nights. Why were the in-laws so stubborn about not revealing David's whereabouts? Was he truly alive? Why did he quit his job without telling anyone? And how could he abandon his young children? As these thoughts consumed me, my worry turned into anger. I decided to prioritize the kids and carry on. Fortunately, the in-laws provided us with $3,000 each month for living expenses. Plus, I was working, so the three of us managed fine. Before I knew it, half a year had passed. The kids, initially crying for their dad, gradually adjusted to his absence and stopped asking about him. I, too, had adapted to life without David, and it felt like the new normal. I'd even stopped wondering about his whereabouts. However, out of the blue, I received another summon from the in-laws. When I arrived, I found a divorce application with David's name already filled on their table. Stunned, I stared at the paper. "Just sign it. We'll take care of the rest," they told me. I finally found my voice, asking what was happening. "It's exactly what it looks like. David won't be coming back, and you likely won't see him again. Once the divorce is finalized, our ties will be cut. You'll need to leave the house. We understand it's not easy to move out immediately, so we'll give you a month. Use that time to find a new place and move out sooner if possible. Also, take this." With that, John casually tossed an envelope filled with money onto the table. All the while, Lily nodded in agreement with every word John said. I was so furious with their audacity, I blurted out, "You call me out of nowhere, hand me divorce papers, and expect me just to sign? Disappearing without a word and demanding a divorce is utterly selfish and incredibly irresponsible towards the children. As parents, you should step up and take responsibility. What's the point of waiting for a husband who'll never return? Wouldn't it be smarter to get a divorce and find someone new? Consider this money as fulfilling our responsibility." They were completely irrational. The heated argument with the in-laws continued, but I couldn't come to a decision right then. "I can't give you an answer immediately," I said, and left their house. Once back at the guest house, I reflected on the confrontation. During the argument, the in-laws had said, "Consider David as someone who no longer exists." But his name on the divorce papers confirmed he was alive. Both David and my in-laws seemed out of their minds. It couldn't be a healthy environment for the kids. Could I welcome David back if he suddenly appeared? Could I simply embrace him and say, "Welcome back, we were so worried"? The answer was no. Realizing this, I thought maybe a divorce isn't such a bad idea. I didn't want to deal with those in-laws anymore, and I made up my mind. The next day, I went to the in-laws' house and told them, "I agree to the divorce, but I have conditions." My conditions were clear. I would file the divorce papers only after all the procedures related to the children's allowances were finalized. I wanted the child support in a lump sum. But under no circumstances would David meet the kids in the future. If he tries to, I'll report him immediately. Given the various procedures involved, I wanted the 1-month grace period extended to 6 months. "If you can agree to these terms, I'll consent to the divorce." They nodded in agreement. "I'll have a notary draft the documents." I told them briefly before leaving their house. They nodded in agreement. After all of that, I called my mom. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? Come home right now," my mom, Sophia, responded, clearly upset. To be honest, I wanted to return sooner, but my family home was a flight away, and going through a divorce meant relocating the kids and transferring schools. It was all so complicated, but given the circumstances, it was the best option. After tackling a storm of paperwork and various tasks with intense determination, from tidying up the guest house to disposing of unwanted items, I finally filed the divorce papers. When I reported the filing to my in-laws, their response was simply, "Oh, is that so?" Their demeanor hinted they wanted me gone. At that moment, I genuinely wished they'd just disappear from my life. Once I returned to my childhood home and shared everything with my parents, as expected, they were furious. "I'm going to give those in-laws a piece of my mind," my father Tom shouted, ready to dial their number. I quickly responded, "I don't want anything to do with them anymore. It's best this way," managing to calm him down. Beginning this new chapter in my life was easier thanks to my parents' support. My kids also adjusted well to their new environment. The community was filled with kind-hearted people, and the neighbors were incredibly friendly. The moms I met at the community center, after hearing my story, showered me with warmth and support. They'd say things like, "You can always count on us," and "Here are some veggies my parents grew. Please have some if you'd like." Everyone was genuinely supportive and caring. Surrounded and nurtured by the loving community, life went on, and the kids grew up wonderfully. May became a high school student, while Kelly started attending middle school. Interestingly, the two sisters had clearly distinct strengths. May loved studying and was consistently at the top of her class academically, but sports? Not her thing. Kelly, on the other hand, was an all-around athlete, even being selected for advanced training teams. Yet when it came to studies, she was just average. It's natural for everyone to have their strengths and weaknesses, but it was fascinating how starkly different the two sisters were in this regard. We often chatted about this intriguing divide with amusement. One time, Kelly made it to the newspaper after winning an accolade in a sports tournament. Of course, that was all thanks to her hard work, and I didn't take any credit for it, but strange things began happening after that article came out. The first oddity was the silent phone calls, about every 3 days. We'd get a call, but when my mom picked up, there would just be silence on the other end, followed by a hang-up. At first, we brushed it off as wrong numbers. However, upon closer inspection, we realized that these silent calls always came at the same time. Recognizing this pattern, we began to feel there was something off about these calls. After receiving these mysterious calls multiple times, I finally answered one myself. The caller remained silent, and in frustration, I blurted out, "Enough of this! If you call again, I'll report this to the police and unmask who you really are." Surprisingly, the calls ceased after that outburst. A little while after, I finished my usual shopping at the supermarket. As I was heading to the parking lot, which was a bit far away, it happened. As I was walking, I heard someone call out my name from behind. When I turned around, there stood a scruffy-looking old man with an unkempt beard all by himself. My initial reaction to the stranger using my name was, "Who are you?" slipping out aloud in confusion. The man replied, drawing closer, "It's me. Long time no see." It took me a moment, but then I realized that the unkempt man was in fact my David. White hair mixed with gray, that careless beard I mentioned earlier, and a rough skin that indicated a life of hardship. This unexpected reunion brought no joy. Instead, I was bewildered and asked, "Why are you here? How are you still alive?" To which David responded, "I saw Kelly in the newspaper." I quickly retorted, "Hold on, you haven't seen her in years. How do you even recognize her?" David hesitated before replying, "My parents happened upon the article and told me she was my daughter." David explained that seeing Kelly's article had stirred up various emotions, prompting him to seek me out. "Your sudden appearance is the last thing I want. There's not even a shred of intention to let you see the kids now," I said as I tried to get into my car. In a desperate move, David quickly grabbed my arm, pleading, "I'm sorry, just let me talk just for a little while." I snapped back, "Let go, you scumbag." I tried to break free, but against a grown man, it wasn't that easy. I decided it was best not to escalate things further and reluctantly agreed. "All right, 30 minutes. We moved to a different location. We went to a nearby park bench. David sat down, but I chose to remain standing. I couldn't bring myself to sit next to him. Growing impatient with David's silence, I pressed him. "Why did you text me and then just vanish? What have you been doing?" David began recounting the events from back then. In essence, here's what he said. "We have 2 daughters, but to be honest, the in-laws always wanted a son. His parents were urging him to quickly have a 3rd child, hoping it would be a boy. But with Kelly's toddler tantrums in full swing, the atmosphere at home wasn't conducive to even thinking about having another child. When he told them about our situation, they suggested he marry a new daughter-in-law who would give them a male grandchild. They even mentioned knowing a girl from a wealthy family who might be suitable. At first, he resisted the idea, but he was feeling neglected and desperate, and when they introduced him to the girl, he was smitten at first sight. Turns out her family runs a successful business, and they told him, "If you marry her, we'll hire you. You can leave your current job." And that's exactly what he did. He impulsively quit his job and spent most of his time at her family's place. Soon after our divorce was finalized, he married her, and were quickly blessed with a child, a boy, just as the in-laws had hoped. Both parents were overjoyed. They spoiled him to no end, leading him to believe that he could get whatever he wanted. If something didn't go his way, he'd throw a fit. This "what's yours is mine" attitude of his spiraled out of control, and he began to bully his peers constantly. As a result, he became notorious among other kids, and they started avoiding him. Even though there was a chance to correct his behavior while he was still young, they just continued to let him be. As expected, when he reached middle school, his emotional maturity was severely lacking. He would throw objects and lash out at classmates and even teachers. Academically, he wasn't any better, always scoring the lowest grades. Every now and then, a grade slightly better, but not by much. His main teacher eventually told us outright that if he continued this way, no school would accept him. So in a moment of concern, we decided to send him to a tutoring center. But of course, it didn't last long. He injured another student over a silly reason like not lending him an eraser, and was promptly kicked out. After all that, he somehow managed to get into high school where they'd accept anyone who could write their name. But even there, he caused so much trouble that he got expelled within the first year. Since then, he's been cooped up at home. And to top it off, since his new marriage, he's been working at his spouse's family's business. Being the only one who joined after marriage, he felt out of place and had to swallow a lot of pride. Between the strains at home and work, he was mentally worn out. Then he came across that newspaper article. It made him realize the weight of his mistakes. He wanted to at least apologize. He tried calling, but words failed him, which resulted in those silent calls. When I yelled at him during one of those calls, he decided he needed to face me in person. "So it was you behind those creepy silent calls? It's like you were stalking us. Look, I get a rough idea of why you vanished. You discarded us, hoping for a better life for yourself. But when things didn't pan out, you wanted consolation, right? You know what? This mess, it's all on you. In our eyes, you've been gone from this world. When your parents handed me the divorce papers, they said you were no longer around. Being haunted by an apologetic ghost isn't comforting. It's downright creepy. Please just vanish for real." David's eyes widened in shock. He didn't expect that reaction. I need to go now, and headed home. When I told my parents about the encounter, they were furious, saying, "After all this time, he shows up now?" But the saga wasn't over. The next week, he tried coming to my parents' house when neither I nor the kids were around, making a fuss at the entrance, pleading to see us and to apologize. My father, not having any of it, called the cops. Hearing the sirens, David fled before he could be caught red-handed. But he still loitered around the house, eventually getting nabbed by patrolling officers. The news of this incident spread to the in-laws' house and also reached the family of David's current spouse. As a result, David was fired from his job and got divorced. However, his spouse didn't want to take custody of their challenging son. So I heard he ended up being left in the care of a church or something like that. After the divorce, when David moved back to the in-laws' house, his parents were incredibly angry with him. They blamed him, saying, "This is your fault. We're facing this embarrassment." He retorted, "It's all because of you guys that my life's a mess," which led to explosive arguments between them. I once asked an acquaintance living nearby about the situation at the in-laws' house. They mentioned hearing loud noises as if things were being broken, and the constant sound of bitter arguments between the family members almost every day. Hearing all of this, I felt indifferent about David, thinking, "Oh well," but I genuinely wish he'd stop getting involved in our lives. I just nodded and moved on with my day.